I'm on.
All right, I've just spotted 3.
That is amazing.
No, it's so delicious.
Today I am going to be doing a masterclass around how to cook a potato. One of the things that have really stood out for me when I'm cooking with spuds is the use of animal fats. Today I'm going to use both duck fat and beef tallow. A few years ago, I listened to a really interesting podcast on revisionist history from Malcolm Gladwell, and he talked about the process of how animal fats have basically been eradicated from our diet and from restaurants. I found that podcast really resonated with me around utilizing these animal fats for one, but also what happens to us on a human level, on a biological level. When we consume animal fats, we feel more satiated than we would from consuming say vegetable or polyunsaturated fats. This is going to help us to feel more full essentially and stop us from overeating, which is very easy to do on the humble potato. The other thing that I'm going to show you how to do today is how to make an almond cream or bread sauce. There's a couple of different names for this. It's a sauce that you can add a couple of other ingredients to, and it becomes extremely diverse. This is going to be used with a humble piece of sourdough. It's what you use the old bread to make a sauce. We're going to soak that in milk. We're going to make that bread nice and soft. We're going to roast off our almonds, and then we're going to make a really thick, creamy sauce. There's a couple of things you need to be careful of when you're making your almond cream, and that is that if we overwork the gluten structure of the bread, you're going to develop a lot of elasticity within the sauce, and that's going to not have such a favorable mouthfeel. Our idea here is to let the milk do all the work to break down and soften the bread, and then we just want to get a lovely emulsification with our nuts. So, should we get on with it? First things first, all we're going to do is take our bread and we're just going to cut that into some little strips and squares. And the more cutting that we do here, the easier the work for the milk is going to be. So we'll just put that back in the bowl and use all the crust of it as well. We're going to use the almonds with the skin on them. That's about 250, 300 mils of milk there. So we'll just push that into the milk and let it do its thing. All right, next step is our potatoes. So this whole thing about how we're gonna make a really crispy skinned potato with a nice soft center without it being too dehydrated. Today I'm gonna use chat potatoes or new potatoes. I really like how they present. They're nice and easy for me to be able to squash. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna boil these in heavily salted water until they're soft, and then we're gonna let them cool down in the fridge. And the trick here is to get them to be cold by the time that we start to cook them. We'll boil them, we'll crush them somewhat, and it's gonna get a couple of little frayed edges, and those little frayed edges is what's gonna bring the rain when it comes to the crunch. So we're gonna run a half goose fat or duck fat, half pork lard, and we should get a really nice crispy fried result. Next up, I'm just gonna boil my potatoes. I've just got a small saucepan here. I'm not really worried about having a big body of water. Just fill that up with hot water. Get that onto your burner. It's probably gonna be about 10 to 15 minutes. And we're off. It's time to get a little bit more serious about making our almond cream. I'm gonna continue to give these a little stir to make sure that it's nice, getting nice and soft. We've got a little bit of extra milk just to adjust our sauce. We're gonna roast off our almonds. We want a really nice, heavy roast on the almonds because that's gonna bring a bigger depth of flavor and a really nice nutty flavor. So you can see these little dark edges here. This is what we're chasing. This is what's gonna give us a bit of a greater depth of flavor. It only takes a couple of minutes on the pan. You can do this in the oven if you don't have the confidence, but I don't feel as though you get the same type of result. So a little tip with caring for your nuts is to make sure that you get them out of the pan that you've been cooking them in quite quickly, because they'll continue to cook in here and sometimes they'll go further than you want them to. They look good to me. We're just gonna let those cool down a touch, and then it's time to give everything a little bit of a whiz here. I'm just gonna toss all my bread. We're just gonna add all of our nuts in there, and then just gonna get a good teaspoon and a half of Dijon mustard. Another little go of some salt, some cracked pepper, some olive oil, and then we're going to use the juice and zest of 1 lemon. Give that a good squeeze. Now, don't be alarmed. You're gonna probably see a little reaction from the milk and the acid. We're also gonna use sherry vinegar. I really like a sherry vinegar because it's very tart, but it also has a little bit of natural sweetness to it that I quite enjoy. And then we've got a bulb of this elephant garlic. Now, these things are unbelievable. 1 bulb, 1 garlic. Come on, who doesn't like that? So I'm just using the microplane. And I want fresh garlic in this. I want something that's a little bit pungent. I'm having a bit of a play here on a garlic sauce, but I don't want to make something that's oil-based or yogurt-based. So I'm liking the element of the double carb. I'm going to use the carbohydrate from the potato. I'm going to use the carbohydrate from the sourdough. All right, I'm really happy with how this is looking. Our nuts are in there, they're nice and toasted. We've got our fresh garlic, olive oil, Dijon mustard, milk and bread. What I'm gonna do now is give that a bit of a zip in the thermo. Just remember that the longer that you whip your sauce for, the longer that you whip and develop the gluten structure of the bread, the thicker it's going to become. So as you can see, it's still a little bit grainy. Just gonna give it another little splash of milk. I'm liking that consistency, but the longer I whip, the thicker it gets. Oh yeah. So this is what I'm looking for. See that silkiness to it? It's smooth. I'm getting a big punch of garlic. It's exactly what I want. We want something quite intense to be able to match up and cut through the potato. I'm just gonna set that aside. So I'm just gonna strain these spuds off. I'm happy with how soft they are. And as that water's reduced, and there's a significant amount of salt in there, so these are gonna be nicely seasoned. I'm gonna chuck these in the freezer now because they've had a bit of time on the stove, and I basically wanna stop the cooking process. If you wanna play the game of letting them come off and just putting them in the fridge or sitting on the bench, I wouldn't suggest that. I would suggest cooking the potato to the place that you like and snapping it shut. Here's where the dish comes together. We've made our almond cream, we've got our spuds cooling down. Like I've just checked them, they're ready to rumble. We've done a little bit of a cleanup. So what we want to do now is get some garlic prepped, and we are simply going to fry these potatoes with garlic, thyme, a little bit of rosemary salt, give them a toss in our animal fats, and then present them on top of our almond cream with a little bit of Dukkah. First up, we're just gonna get a few of these little garlic bombs sorted out. I'm just loving these because all we have to do is cut the backs off them. And we've got a whole bulb. Okay, I'm really happy with these. I can see, I can feel that they're nice and soft in the center. And all I'm gonna do is just give it a little press with my knife As you can see there, I'm getting these nice little crumbly edges, and it's those small little broken edges that are gonna get the fat to go into there and fry up and give me some really crunchy pieces, and that's what's gonna create the texture. So we're just gonna keep squashing these, and if some of them split, some of them stay whole, the whole thing here is about them not being uniform. I think that is basically one of my fundamental principles of my style of cooking, is that things are not uniform. And that's how you can create layers of texture. So I like what we've got happening here. This is a time not to fuck around, because we're basically shallow frying our potatoes. If you just pour these potatoes in willy-nilly, there's a very high chance you're gonna end up wearing that oil, and it is dangerously hot. So what you wanna do is just work with a bowl facing you and pour forward. Don't turn them over just yet. What you wanna do by letting them just fry where they lay is that you'll start to develop much more caramelization. What we're trying to achieve here is some really hard fried crunchy bits and some softer parts of the potato. If we move our spuds around too much in this process here, we'll end up evenly cooking them. And it sounds sort of strange to say that, but what we want to do is we want to have some inconsistencies within the potatoes. Everything's cooked, everything's soft, it's going to have a lovely mouthfeel. Now it's time to introduce some texture. So what we're going to do, fry the fuck out of those edges. It's time now just to add a couple of these little garlic bombs. Keep those whole. They'll get nice and dark on the outside, and they'll steam a little bit on the inside. So we're starting to see it here. Wello. We're starting to see some of that colour that we're after, but we still have a little bit more to go. But we want those edges, like we can even give them a bit of a squish. Like we want those edges real hard fried. And we want that goose and duck fat in there. That's where the key to all this flavour is. We're starting to get to the turning point of this now. We're starting to get some really nice dark caramel tones forming. The fats are getting into those little broken edges there. They're getting nice and fried and crunchy. And what we're looking for is soft and crunchy. So they're the two textures we're chasing. You know, we're going to turn these shortly. Yeah, we're starting to see these really nice golden pieces. I'm happy with how things are going. Got a really nice fragrant rosemary salt. Just give that a little toss. Tiny little stir here. And I'm just going to add some fresh hard herbs into this. That's going to light up a little bit, make a bit of a reaction. Don't worry about all that spitting, but we just want them to get hit with the fat, not to the point where they blacken and change colour and become charcoal, but to the point where the leaves become a little bit softer and a bit easier to digest. Okay, I'm happy with how this is looking. Got some nice caramel tones in here. My garlic's getting a bit of a fry on. I probably could have chucked those in a little bit earlier, but suit yourself. I like them in big chunks and I don't mind them a little bit firmer. Just gonna take a nice little dollop of my almond cream, and then I'm just gonna spoon my potatoes and a couple of these fried garlic bombs in there. Ooh, this bit here. Don't fuss around with it too much, although I'm fussing around with it a bit. So I've got a nice little Dukkah spice that we make. So I'm just gonna give that a little spray. So I've got some nice fried hard bits. I've got some texture in there. I've got a nice little bit of color with my fried thyme. I'm just gonna give it a little bit of a splash of some olive oil, because everything is good with olive oil. And that's us. We've utilized some of our old bread and a bit of milk and a few nuts. We've taken a humble potato, we've fried it in some animal fats, and I can tell just by looking at that it's gonna be tasty as fuck. And this is how you make my animal fat fried potatoes.
Oh, fucking hell. Yes.